Um, so Doug and Ken, Ken thought he was at the kickoff meeting in December. Were you there as well, Doug?
I believe I was.
Okay. The reason I ask is this meeting is set up with about a 15 slide overview presentation, and then the rest of it is like roll up the sleeves and talk through some things. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the formal presentation if it's stuff you're already familiar with.
Yeah, I've worked on hazard mitigation plans before, so
Okay.
and I've not worked in Danville stuff, so Ken will be the expert on that.
Okay. So if you both worked on plans before, I'm going to skip my way through this in about 5 minutes instead of 15 minutes, and then we'll get into the roll up the sleeve stuff. And even though we started 20 minutes late, I guarantee that we're going to finish more than a half an hour early. So, all right, I think we will. So let me just get to the next slide. So yeah, really what, I said we're going to do a quick overview of why we're doing this, what the requirements are, what hazards are in the plan. And then the majority of the meeting is talking through, basically we've extracted pieces of the Danville relevant pieces into a Word document that we sent out. We just want to cruise through that and see what's changed since 2016, what different data might be available, talk a little bit about the mitigation strategies, et cetera. So it's mostly just talking through those documents. You know already that this is required every 5 years since the Disaster Mitigation Act, and it's been updated on that cycle since 2006. You know that it's focused on mitigation as opposed to response and recovery, and preparedness. And mitigation is long-term actions that reduce or eliminate injuries, damages, and allow continuity of critical functions. So it's really, I just spent a second on this slide to emphasize that it's not, we're not so much focused on response and recovery phases of emergency management as we are on these kind of long-term actions. Again, another emphasis is that it's not, to keep in mind, and I'm sure you well know this, but a lot of disaster costs are on resources like public works and public safety, responding to events, debris management, transportation stuff. So we want to keep that in mind too, not just projects to protect things that are in harm's way, but also, looking at how do we reduce the burden of expenditures that come along with disasters. And then lastly, the plan is required for these for FEMA grant programs. So I'll spend just a minute longer on this slide. The 3 primary grant programs that require this plan to be updated and approved every 5 years are listed. The first one, building resilient infrastructure and communities, that is a new one, and it replaces what used to be the PDM, or pre-disaster mitigation program. Last year, 2020, was its first year. The key difference is it's still annual. Commonwealth of Virginia will get a set aside each year, and there's also a nationwide competitive pot, but the funding has really gone up dramatically, and it's supposed to continue in that direction in 2021. No guarantees, obviously, and the kind of rejuvenated focus of BRIC is on, as the name implies, larger infrastructure projects and community lifeline related things. But the other key difference is that it has a capacity and capability improvement section of the grant where you can now ask for money for things like studies, permitting, all the typical pesky things that you have to do before you design and construct a project that were always hard to find money for. It makes money available for those things. So I think it's a really big improvement over the last program. And if the trend continues, at least for a few years, it'll have a lot of money. And the next available timing of that one is the fall of this year, somewhere in the September, October timeframe. So it plays in pretty timely with this update and identifying projects that might be good candidates for that. The other 2 you're probably familiar with, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. That's the one that's after a presidentially declared disaster. 15+% of the damages from the disaster are made available afterwards for mitigation projects. And the FMA is more closely related to structures insured by the National Flood Insurance Program. So that's more, it's a smaller pot of money, and it's more designed for things like home elevations and acquisitions and small drainage projects that specifically protect NFIP insured businesses or homes. So HMGP and BRIC are the two big ones. And for HMGP, Tropical Storm Michael and Hurricane Florence were the last two declared disasters in Virginia, and we believe the money is mostly allocated from those. So BRIC in the fall will probably be the next opportunity to apply for grants. And then again, even though this plan is driven by the FEMA requirement, we encourage you to put good projects in there anyways, even if they're not eligible for FEMA funding, because there's lots of different type of money out there, from community development block grants to the Army Corps of Engineers to forestry grants and all types of different things. So let's not limit the focus on just things that FEMA will pay for. Some examples of things that can be done with mitigation funding: retrofitting for different types of disasters, hardening infrastructure, acquisitions, elevations, those types of things. The natural hazards included in the plan, and there are some man-made ones that we'll go through, but the natural hazards are, I won't read them, but you can see on the screen the ones you would typically think of. This go around, there's a requirement that we include a discussion of the impacts of climate change. And the way we'll do that is not to have a climate change section per se, but since it's not really a hazard in and of itself, it just has an influence on most of the other natural hazards. So, for example, we're seeing an increase in high intensity, short duration, but very high intensity rainfall events. So we're seeing a lot of different types of flooding as opposed to just the out of the banks floodplain spilling over type of flooding. Also impacts on drought, which has impacts on wildfire, et cetera. So when we update the risk assessment, each section will talk a little bit about what's changing with regard to climate change. The man-made and human-caused hazards, high voltage transmission lines, spills, pipelines, agri-terrorism, and dam failure are the ones in the plan currently. So we'll be refreshing the risk assessment for each of those. And then the strategies relate back obviously to the hazards that we identify risk and vulnerability for, and they generally fall into these different buckets, with natural resource protection being things like wetlands preservation for flood storage, acquisition of property. Prevention is more of the site specific, or well, prevention can be a lot of different things: flood insurance, community rating system, things like that. Structural projects, self-explanatory, drainage, infrastructure, regrading, those types of earth moving projects. And then property protection is more the acquisition, elevation, flood proofing, raising utilities type generators, things like that. Emergency services, access, egress, evacuation, warning systems, critical facilities related projects. And then public education is focused on, kind of covers the whole sphere, but it's kind of designed to encourage private property owners to kind of take responsibility for mitigating their own risks and vulnerabilities. I have examples of, these are flood related examples. I won't go through them since I just listed some of them or talked about some of them on the previous slide. Some other examples of different types of mitigation strategies that aren't related to floods. Anything from tree maintenance for wind and winter weather to dry hydrants for fire, etc. So the plan update requirements. unfortunately, that even though this is done every 5 years and not a whole lot is drastically changing in your region, there is a requirement to go through the entire comprehensive planning process over again each time, focused on fostering relationships, which means stakeholder and public involvement, which we'll talk more about. We need to describe who is involved in the process and how the plan was prepared and what their involvement was, and then how we're going to implement and maintain and monitor progress on the plan. So all things you've been through before. For all the hazards we just talked about, we're going to update the profiles, any history and new events, changes in vulnerability, or including better data. For example, if you have had a reevaluation or you have better parcel data or there's a better model to look at a particular hazard. So this is kind of the continuous improvement process of the risk assessment. We'll also refresh the losses, potential loss estimates, and talk about any kind of development that's going on in Danville that might be impacting things. And then for the mitigation strategies and actions, as part of the meeting today, I know you just went through yours recently in 2019 or 2020, but we're going to cruise through those and look at them in terms of whether we want to keep ones that haven't been done, if they still make sense, if we want to get rid of some. There's a focus by FEMA currently to take things that are really capabilities, like if you say continue to enforce the National Flood Insurance Program regulations, they'll say that's a capability, and it's not really a 5-year strategy. So put it in the capability assessment section, and don't junk up your mitigation strategy with stuff that you're doing just to have a list. So we'll be focusing on sort of more of the measurable things. And then again, looking through the capabilities, programs, dollars, things like that to see if anything has changed. And then you're aware of the approval process that we'll go through at the end. So those are the major components. Where we are now, we had the kickoff meeting so there's a larger mitigation advisory committee, which covers the planning district commission area and has representation from the counties, cities, and towns. And then these are what we're calling the local planning teams. So you guys are in for Danville. And we did it. This is something a little different from the last go around. And we did it this way mostly because of the pandemic. And we can't have long workshops where we break out into groups and do this stuff. So we figured we'd designate a local team for a couple of quick pop-up calls like this one, just to answer questions and provide data. So you see in the box there what we wanted to get accomplished today, just general information on that we need to update the capability assessment and risk assessment, which is already underway. The next milestone meeting of the full mitigation committee will be to present draft findings from the capability assessment and risk assessment, and to begin the process of building new goals and objectives and projects for the next go around. After that meeting, we'll probably have another series of these meetings to kind of fine tune the mitigation strategies. Also at that point, before that point, we'll be doing a public survey, we'll be doing a story map, and asking for assistance posting things on websites and social media to help get the public involvement and the stakeholder involvement that we need. So that could be a bit of a challenge, but that's about we'll start that process in probably month to a month and a half from now, when we have drafts of things to start presenting. And then there'll be a second or third, if you count the kickoff meeting, milestone workshop where we finalize the new mitigation strategies, and then we'll complete a draft of the plan. The third or fourth, depending on how you count it, workshop will be a shorter, more of a blessing of the draft before we send it off to FEMA. So this is all what we're trying to do by the summer, just so you can sort of see it in sequence. That was the presentation portion of the meeting. The rest of it, what we're going to do is pull up that Word doc and then your Excel sheet for the strategies and just kind of talk through some things. I did that really fast. Any questions or clarification?
Not on my end.
All right. I'll stop sharing and let Jade pull up the other deck. And you guys are our last meeting, so poor Michael has had to sit through that presentation 6 times now. So.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, if you can if there's any way to make it a little bigger, that would be helpful, but.
Better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So basically, we're going to scroll through this handout. It has a lot of the pertinent information for Danville from the 2016 version of the hazard mitigation plan. We're going to quickly try and update as many of these as possible. So we're going to go through the community profile, cover things like development trends, critical facilities, infrastructure. And then we also have a capability assessment, checks in on technical capability, fiscal, personnel, and some policy and program capabilities. And then we will finish off with the hazard ranking, mitigation strategies, and then goals. And then at that point, we'll pull up the Excel sheet that Scott had mentioned, and we will just quickly try and get an update of for any of your mitigation strategies and see where you guys are at on those. Okay. So I'm not going to have you guys read all this. This is basically just to show you what was in the 2016 plan. This is covering development trends. So the goal here is just to get an idea of any kind of development that you guys have seen since 2016, any residential buildings that are new, any commercial buildings, anything like that. So if there's anything to note, go ahead and shout it out.
Since 2016, we've had a bunch of dwelling units built downtown. I don't know how many off the top of my head. We'll have to pull that data and see what that is. We've had some commercial development up along Piedmont Drive, around the mall. Trying to think of new construction, not just renovation.
Any of the new residential units or commercial development in the floodplain or any other high hazard areas?
Not in high hazard areas. We haven't had a lot of stuff. We really haven't had anything in high hazard. We've had a few storms since 2016, especially out in the Westover area, some tornadoes and things that took out residential. So we've had redevelopment of things that were damaged during storms, but nothing new per se out in that area. Trying to think. We do have one restaurant and doctor's office. I'll have to see what year that was built. They were located in what would be a high hazard area. They took over an existing building. I don't know if that was before 16 or after 16. We'll have to pull data on that and see.
Okay. When you say high hazard area, you mean in a floodplain?
Yeah.
Okay.
The building was already in a floodway.
Oh, okay.
And they occupied the space. The basement area is a meeting space that just, when it gets flooded, they come in, hose it out, reuse it. The upper floors of the building, elevation-wise, are out of it. So that hasn't been a big problem except our parking lot floods. But like I said, I can't remember what year that was. I think it was post 16. We'll pull data and see.
Okay.
So this next section, it covers any updates to critical facilities. This table is it's the FEMA recommended table, and it's pretty basic. It just gives you some categories and just a number of critical facilities. But if you guys know of any new developments with any of these, any decommissions, basically any changes, or if any of the critical facilities now have generators or hookups for those.
This is where I wish the fire department was in, because we've had some generators and other things installed at some of those facilities. We do have a relatively new fire station, which replaced one. I'm not sure what year that was. It was somewhere close to that. We'll have to pull that data as well. We're in the process of doing a police station now, but it's going to be next year. So I guess that'll go into the future plan. Generators will have to, Tim Duffer will have that information. Was he invited as part of this?
Yeah, I did. He was invited. I don't know if he responded or not. Let's see. Yeah, he did accept the original meeting, and I sent him this new one as well, but I haven't heard from him since.
We'll try to get with him and see, because his office was doing the generator installations on facilities. We've had, going back to the previous thing, we've had some bridges and other things on our pedestrian trail get knocked out and replaced. It's not critical. Would that be considered redevelopment, or is that going to come later on in a different portion?
We're going to talk a little bit about infrastructure
Okay.
and storm history, so we can catch it either place.
Okay, so we can follow up with Tim to get more information on that as well. No big deal.
Yeah. Do you know if you have a critical facility layer in your GIS? We just want to make sure. We have a list from the last time, and we must have had coordinates because there was a map of all of them. We're just curious if there's been any updates to that layer, so we make sure that we catch the most current things. Is that another Tim question?
I would say yes, because I don't know about it. So Doug, feel free to chime in if you know any of these layers that I don't. It's not things I usually look at. So
I've not been made aware of anything with our GIS data library.
Okay.
I can try to do a little research real quick while you guys are talking about this.
All right.
Do you know if that would be available online? Do you guys typically put that on your website?
We have a GIS portal, but I'm not sure. So that's what I was going to take a look at, and maybe I can post some links in the chat here.
Is there a GIS coordinator in the city?
yes, we do have a GIS coordinator, and I don't know that we put critical infrastructure online. They're a little risk adverse to letting people know where important stuff is, just in case. So
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of intuitive anyway. Like bridges, power stations, transformers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. People who want to find it bad enough are going to find it, right?
Okay, so yeah, we can follow up with Tim on any.
You happen to know the name of the GIS coordinator in case we need to follow up with him or her?
I have no idea who it is.
I should know, but used to be Scott Longerbeam. I'm not sure if he's still it or not.
We can look around online.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything infrastructure related like that. So who knows?
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we can move on to any hazard events of note since 2016. So we already have noted down Tropical Storm Michael, Hurricane Florence, but just anything smaller, any kind of more localized flooding events, winter storms, notable tornadoes. I know you mentioned one earlier. Do you have any information of when, and then a general idea of where those took place? And then also if you guys took any money from FEMA for these events.
This is where Tim would be perfect because he tracked all that. We had 2 tornadoes hit almost the same area in, I think one was, they were 2 years apart, but they've been since then on the Westover Hills area. I think one was an F0, one may have been an F1. Did some pretty good damage to some old growth trees, crushed some vehicles, lots of utility lines and stuff like that down. Whether it qualified for FEMA disaster money, I don't know. We've had a couple tropical storms that flooded things out. We worked with the Weather Service to get our flood elevations changed because they were calling for floods at times that nothing was, gonna flood. So we just had all that stuff redone like a year or 2 ago. And so it's much easier now when they don't call for a flood unless it's actually going to flood. We had, let's see. Dang, yeah, this is stuff that he's done because we had Michael came through and destroyed a bunch of stuff, and Tim was keeping track of all that. He was the coordinator with FEMA on reimbursement. We can pull all that from Crisis Track. I just don't have access to it at the moment. I can't get any of that data while we're on this call, but he's got all that.
Okay, yeah, I'm taking notes on that. So my plan for after the meeting is I'm gonna compile and clean up some of these notes and then make a separate list of things that we need to follow up on. So we'll be able to include all that.
No major winter storms that I remember. We had some localized flooding, the Apple Branch area, twice, not last year, but the year before. So that would have been, I think, 19. We had water rescues and things like that. It caused substantial damage to some inventory for automobile dealers. Kind of backed up and flooded the roadway, and they parked their cars beside the roadway. We had, let's see, we had one additional out east end by the airport, Cane Creek floodplain area. They had to rescue people from Route 58, because of floodwaters. So we've had some small localized events that did require people to be rescued. Not major structural damage.
What was the name of the brook again on that one?
That was the Cane Creek.
Cane Creek.
CANE Creek. The other one was Apple Branch. Apple Branch flooded twice.
And both those times are in 2019?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, 28 years, the dates start to run together. I just...
Okay. All right, so we can move on to transportation. Any updates there of note? I know a couple of the other jurisdictions had mentioned that there was some highways being developed. I don't know if those reach your jurisdiction or not.
The 785, the Route 29 thing is supposed to go around us, as you can see from the note. So that's still the same. Nothing changed where it says would be designated in the city of Danville. Our bypass is still proposed for it. I don't think we've had any changes. We can check with our transportation director and see if anything is up with him. Bus service, we've switched to smaller buses, and I don't think that's really considered critical or anything else. They're working on something at the airport at the moment, but I don't know what it is. I'll have to check with Mark. Mark Edelman's our transportation director.
What was that name, Mark?
The M-A-R-C, not with a K, but it's M-A-R-C, Edelman, A-D-L-E-M-A-N.
Okay. I think we covered a lot of stuff with infrastructure, but if there's any specific changes to infrastructure, you can know anything. Let's see. You said you had contracts to purchase bulk water, or PCSA had contracts from you guys.
So for infrastructure, and I'm afraid this might be another Tim question, but well, maybe not. Is the entire city on public water and sewer? Yeah.
No, I mean, we've got areas of the city that still are not served by it. There are a few outlying areas that still use well and septic. It's a code requirement that everybody ties in, but especially on the far side, south side of the bypass, some of that area is not served, and a little bit at the far west end of the city is not served. Probably 95% or higher is served by it, but we've got some places it's just not cost effective to run. The infrastructure, like I said, we lost portions of our pedestrian trail. One of our walking bridges over the trail ended up about a half mile down the Dan River because it picked it up, floated it down, twisted it. We've had that bridge reinstalled, elevated. We had a couple pipes that carry the trail that were blown out when the bypass failed. VDOT 29 bypass around Danville had a pipe failure. And so the bypass, actually part of it collapsed. So they had to close the bypass for a bit, relocate traffic for a while. But they have went back in with a box culvert under it. The same thing we did with our trail. We box culverted the trail so that we hopefully won't have that problem again. We've relocated a portion that was continually flooding out by Norfolk Southern Railroad Bridge to hopefully not continue to flood. The railroad bridge acts as a dam. Stuff piles up under the bridge. It creates just a damming effect, and then any of the water that goes around the north or south side of it erodes the trail. So we've hopefully moved it. But that railroad bridge causes a lot of problems for us.
Was a lot of this during Michael?
It's a lot of it was during Michael, but just about any flood. Well, the bridge acts as a giant strainer, so it anytime it gets elevated, all the sticks, logs, whatever, jams up on that railroad bridge, and if they don't come clean it out, it causes problems. So. We're looking at removing a dam, but don't put that in there. I hope we do, but we'll see. Other infrastructure. We've done some improvements to the Apple Branch stream after the flooding. There was some issues with erosion and other things collapsing and blocking the channel. So they worked through that, put some gabions or whatever you call it along the side of the bank to stabilize it, opened it up a little bit. They're working on additional projects to improve that. I think they've applied for some grant money through the state, possibly to acquire a building that's built over top of the stream. So we can open that up because that's a choke point. Trying to think of anything else off the top of my head. The city, we built a dike that we shouldn't have built, and we're in the process now of getting a study done to see what we have to do to fix that problem. This is, since you're our consultants, you won't go any further with it. We shouldn't have built it. They built an armored dike around a structure downtown because the guy kept complaining that he's flooding. But so we're now going through the flood study to see whether it can stay or whatever else we can do. So I don't know if that'll be listed as an improvement or not.
So I'm assuming it was in the floodway if you have to do
Yeah,
it.
it was in the floodway, and the public works guys just went ahead and did it. And then we kind of pointed out that it was in the floodway and it wasn't studied, and you can't do that. So now they're going back and trying to study it to see what the impacts will be.
Yeah.
In all disclosure, it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's reminiscing to my earlier career when I used to be the state flood insurance coordinator for Connecticut. So I used to be the guy that busted people for doing stuff like that.
It's not fun when one side of the city is busting the other side of the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't miss that part of the job.
no, yeah. So we're in the process now of having the flood study done. We've got a riverfront park that they're analyzing. Luckily, it's adjacent to the riverfront park, so we're able to just roll that into the H&H study for the park to see what impact this will have on it. Trying to cover everything in full disclosure. Anything I know that's been built along the rivers or that would cause problems. I don't know out in Westover if they undergrounded any of the utilities. That's a question. After the multiple storm events and the trees ripping all the lines out and stuff, I don't know what they did on that. The ice storm recently, we had some problems. We had areas that were out, not necessarily because of our problems, but because of a feeder line that came into us. So our utility area, ice storms are a problem. Kind of an unanticipated event.
Okay.
But we went without power. Some places went without power for multiple days. The coal ash spill, was that addressed in the previous plan? I'm sorry, I don't remember it. I don't know if you guys covered it. When, the river and the water intake and all that stuff where we had to shut down the water system for a while. Would that go in this plan or not?
Yeah, probably. Since we're addressing spills.
Okay. I don't remember what year that was, but that did cause a lot of problems.
It was a coal ash spill, you said?
Yeah, Duke Energy in North Carolina has a coal-fired power plant. Their retention pond where everything goes and settles out, pipe failed, so it dumped all the coal ash, a lot of the coal ash into the Dan River. They didn't tell us till our intake started clogging up full of stuff. Luckily, it didn't get in our water system, but it did cause all kinds of problems. They had to come in and clean up the river and all kinds of other stuff. I don't remember what year that was, but I just know if we're looking at hazards, critical water intake and water supply, that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Okay. That was a lot of good information. Thank you. Okay, if we don't have anything more with that, Scott.
I do have one more thing. The infrastructure deal. We had people get killed during Michael. We have a low water bridge. Well, not a low water bridge. We have a bridge that floods during events. I guess I don't know if you'd consider it low water or not. They drove into it and were, they drowned because of that. That whether there should be some sort of change to to that piece of infrastructure. I don't know if they could elevate the roadway or some sort of warning system or something else during times of flood. They went out, put cones up to tell people. I've never seen the report. I don't know if the water came back up over the cones because it continued to rise, or whether they just, being it was dark, didn't see the cones and drove into it. I don't know. But we did have a loss of life on Goodyear Boulevard because of the road going underwater.
Can you say spell the name of the road again, please?
Goodyear, Goodyear. It's one of two ways to get to our Goodyear plant, one of our largest employers. So when that road shut down, that really limited access to that facility. It goes under, we know what elevation it goes under, and for hurricanes or something like that, it'll happen. That one just hit us so hard, so quick. Like I said, I haven't seen the final report, so I don't know, but I did see pictures where they went out and put cones down while it was still daylight. The person died that evening, but we didn't, water levels did rise afterwards. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but it seems odd that person was able to drive into it. So, whether the cones got moved, floated away, they just missed them. I don't know, but somebody died, and I don't want to see that happen again.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Okay. Before we move on from infrastructure, I don't think we covered, you said about 95% of the areas covered by city water, but the remaining areas of that, how do they handle fire suppression? Do you guys have tankers or something like that you use?
Yeah, we have tankers. There's mutual service agreements with the counties, the volunteers, and the volunteer places have tankers as well. And this is again another question. I wish Tim was here because Tim could tell you exactly what happens if we have a fire out on Moorfield Bridge Road or we don't have water. We've got hydrants relatively close, so I don't know if they're going back and filling up or whether they get when we run out, the county tankers come in. I don't know the answer to that question, and this is going to be one that Tim would have to cover.
Okay.
Outside of the bypass is probably that same thing. We may have mutual aid with North Carolina folks that are just right there. But we've got hydrants probably within half a mile of it. We just don't actually serve the structure with water. So if we can get out there, we can get water to it pretty quick if we can fill up and haul it. And I know that they used to have tankers, and the main trucks hold so much water to begin with. So could be a question for Tim to give all the final details on.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, so we can move on to the capability assessment section. This starts out with just a general self-assessment. So in the 2016 plan, looks like you gave yourself kind of, medium across the board as far as your capacity in these areas. Do you guys see any changes that you'd want to make, or you still look about accurate?
Looks accurate to me.
Okay. All right. Moving along then. So we have staff and organizational capability. I think we just had some basic facts up here. We have a city council, city manager system. City council is elected, has 9 members. And then some details on the city manager and their role. Do you see any details up here that have changed, or is that still pretty consistent?
It looks consistent to me. I mean, nothing's changed politically, organizational capability, all that's still the same. We got Doug now, so got to be better, right, Doug?
That's debatable.
And no reorgs, all these departments that we listed as the ones that are involved in mitigation are still the same.
Yeah, there hasn't been any changes.
Okay.
Sounds good. That's... Okay. So moving on, this is a...
One thing we probably should have listed before with key departments, you know, the like the trail system, the infrastructure there is Parks and Recreation. And also when we have warming centers and stuff like that, social services gets involved. They had, when we lost power and stuff, they opened some warming centers that weren't necessary, but I don't know why they weren't listed. They probably should have been listed back in the previous update. So
Gotcha.
that's not a change from the past. We just didn't have them listed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. So this down here, technical capability matrix, basically give you some different positions, such as planners, emergency manager, GIS staff, and then the different department or areas that they cover. Do you see any changes here? I know you said you didn't really have any structural changes, but you had different positions moving around.
The grant writers, emergency services, police, fire, they've been doing a lot of their own grant writing. I know where it says city administration has community development. We're part of city administration, so if you wanted to take us out specifically and just leave it as city administration, because kind of everybody's writing their own grants. We have, like I said, we're using Crisis Track now to keep track of a lot of stuff. I think that's been a change since 2016. Public Works uses it, community development, the emergency service people, all to keep track of expenses and stuff like that. So it's a little more effective in evaluating the situation.
Okay.
That's a great addition because I always recommend adding something like that for places that don't have it, because it becomes so hard later when you apply for grants to show all the previous damages if you don't capture them somewhere. So I'm glad to hear that you did that.
Yeah, we've also upgraded our we went from iPads to field laptops, basically, or tablets. So all the inspectors have them. A lot of the public works people have them as well. So while you're out in the field, you can actually take pictures of everything and then upload those into the system. And so when it goes back for the FEMA reimbursements, it's really easy. So that we've had a technological improvement since 2016.
Great.
Okay. I know you guys probably don't have your numbers handy with you, but you know, if you know any big changes that have happened to any of these budgets, then we can make note, but we can follow up later for exact details.
No big changes that I know of, but yeah, we'll have to give you exact details. I don't remember what everybody's budgets are.
Yeah, no problem.
Would that be online on your website somewhere?
Yeah, it should be. And we're also going through the budget right now. So, I'll have, as soon as the book gets printed in another week or two, we'll have updated figures, but previous budgets would be online. We've got a casino coming. We just got a big check from the casino folks. So the numbers may look a lot better.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
So this next table covers financing mechanisms. So you guys have check marks next to capital improvement programming, community development block grants, electric fees, things like that. And some of these just saying that you have the capability for them. Do you see
This is
any?
not necessarily if you're collecting them, but if they're available to you or if you've used them in the past.
Yeah.
Well, it looks right. We don't do impact fees. We do have CDBG money. We do capital improvement. We do bonds, no special improvement districts. Yeah, we do still the 911 thing. They have a reverse 911 system. The 911 Call It Emergency Operations Center, that's not necessarily new. That's that fire station. So apparently that must have been in place when we did the last one. So we do have the hazmat team still here.
Do you know when the emergency operations plan was updated last?
I do not.
Okay.
And I believe there's some of the other counties near you guys were in they call the discovery process of updating the flood maps. Have you guys heard any talk about that? I assume it would be happening with you guys too, but.
It is. Yeah, we've talked to them twice during the discovery process. We've given them information, especially on updates for the Apple Branch area, because we did some studies. They're actually supposed to extend that the mapping further north. Right now it stops. I want to say it's at Guilford Street. And they're gonna continue north on it. We've had some substantial flooding north of where the maps stop. So we'd like to get a better handle on areas that we should look out for. Yeah, we've been giving them data. I haven't got anything past that. So.
Gotcha.
Still have a few years to go. But at that point, you'll have to update your zoning, floodplain management zoning ordinance to incorporate the new maps. So we'll make note to probably put that in as a strategy when the new maps are available.
Okay. Moving on to cover the comprehensive plan. Do you know the last time this was updated?
Sorry, Doug's working on it now. So we're getting ready to go out with an RFQ. I'm not sure what his timeline is. That's kind of why I hired him. So I'll let him tell you what he's thinking.
For the comprehensive plan,
Yes.
we will be engaging probably within, what I'd say third quarter this year to update the comprehensive plan. A key theme I want to build on in the plan is the concept of resiliency. And that definitely plays into natural handmade or natural and man-made hazards, in addition to things like economic resiliency, redundancy in utility systems and protecting them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, excellent, excellent timing then. I was glad to hear that. Do you guys participate in that, pardon me if I botch up the acronym, but the ANCHOR program, National and Community something resilience?
I'm not familiar with that, so if you have resources that you can send my way, that'd be great.
Yeah, some of your neighboring communities are. I hadn't heard of it before, but yeah, we can do that. As we learn more about it and start writing about it in the other towns, we'll share that with you.
Yeah, because I mean, a big part of, post hazards is the ability that we can recover from them. So having better energy efficiency, better responses to utility disruptions,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff is valuable to our community.
Agreed. Good. Glad to hear that you're thinking of resiliency as a theme. This is our last meeting, and that's the first time we've heard any of the communities say that. So it's good. Good.
Okay, so this next table focuses on the different plans that you guys have and their support or focus on hazard mitigation. It looks like most of these plans you listed as strongly supports, which is what the H signifies. And then a couple you had under revision. So if you have any updates on these, if some of these are now complete, and if they do incorporate hazard mitigation, then you can mark that down.
CIP we do every year. Doug covered the comp plan, economic development plan. I think they just did a SID last year. EOP would be a question for Tim Duffer. Floodplain management, the H is right, and I'm the floodplain manager, so yeah, we do all that. Hazmat plan, again, another one for Tim. Historic preservation is we do all the time, part of our comprehensive plan. Hazard mitigation we're doing now. Parks and Rec is looking at updating their open space plan. I'm not sure what their status is. Don't know anything on the post-disaster one. That's still the same. RAD response. What is the RAD for?
Radiological.
No clue on that one.
This is a standard table for FEMA, so it may not all be applicable to Danville.
Okay. Stormwater management plan. Yeah, our public works folks handle stormwater management. The H is correct on that.
All right. We already covered that. It's just update years for the emergency operations and comprehensive plan. All right, so moving on to regulation. The little bits of information are carried over from the 2016 plan. See, update floodplain regulations via zoning ordinance. Overlay district is used to impose additional requirements on properties within the designated floodplain area. Can you think of anything related to zoning that you'd want to add?
Not related to the actual zoning. If there are, because I'm under the impression we have kind of a standard zoning overlay that the Commonwealth asked the communities that we're participating to adopt. If there are educational materials or opportunities that may be valuable for us to look at in 2021. But I'm not aware of anything that we currently have that would have changed. Does that make sense, Kenny?
Correct. And I like the way you say that the state recommended that we do that. That was a polite way of saying they told us we had to.
Right, right. But it's standardized. You know, but I think where we have the language, you know, maybe having, you know, if there's some regional education materials or concepts that we could engage in, that would be helpful to people. Because again, this gets back to the concept of resiliency, right?
Right. So, just to be clear, you're talking about the floodplain management overlay requirements, right? You're just looking
Right.
for some information, like clarifying information or information about grants or specific mitigation strategies, things like that.
More materials for homeowners, business owners, local constituents. I'm not worried about, you know, well, I mean, at some point we will be worried about grants and such, but, you know, explaining to homeowners why there may be certain things we need to do or that they can do on their own to minimize potential flooding. I mean, somebody asked me if they could just burn it all down, and I'm like, I don't know if that's really going to be the recommended practice. I don't know. So.
Okay, so the other things covered here, subdivision regulations, floodplain regulations, other ordinances, got some stuff about trees down here. Yeah, if you guys can think of anything else related to any regulations you guys have, I can update any of those. We'll take that as a no and move right along. Okay, so this table is similar to the one above, seeing how your ordinances incorporate hazard mitigation or support hazard mitigation. So do these still look accurate? Or are there any changes that need to be made?
Looks accurate to me.
Yeah, that one's very, very redundant with the other one.
Yeah. Okay, so we made it through the bulk of it. So now moving on to the hazard ranking. This was brought up and covered a bit during the kickoff. And I believe there was talk about the ranking for tornado and earthquake, making some changes there, increasing those to match what the Virginia rankings are for this next plan. But it's just more of kind of a gut check, I guess. If you guys see any that you feel need to be raised or lowered, we can take some of that feedback now.
Yeah, just a point of clarification too. So these don't mean that, for example, tornado is only a limited threat, or a medium threat. It's sort of a ranking is based on a bunch of things: probability of occurrence, how much of the city might get impacted by it if it did occur, what the primary physical damages are, what the secondary damages are. Each one of those is weighted in a formula, and it kind of spits out a level of planning consideration it'll get in the plan. So obviously flooding and wind are, have always been the highest, but so I just wanted to point that out. And then the three columns are what you said in 2011 on the left. When I say you, I mean collectively the Planning District Commission said in 2016, and then how the Commonwealth ranked it in the right-hand column. And we went through an exercise for this at the bigger mitigation advisory committee kickoff meeting. And as Jay just said, the only changes that came out of that were tornado and earthquake being bumped up a level each.
All right, I would say that's fine. We haven't had as much problem with winter storms as we've had with tornadoes / heavy thunderstorms, so I agree with that.
Okay.
Let's see, and then there's a couple other human-caused ones down here that got cut off. Give you a second to look at those. And there'll be other opportunities to take a look at this and provide feedback as well. But for now, we can move on to the,
That high voltage transmission line just caused us problems last week. So I don't know how we want to rank that, but that was, yeah, the ice storm, we lost a bunch because a lot of people because of that. It wasn't our feed. We'll try to check with utilities and ask them what they would consider it.
Okay. Yeah, and again, just think of it when you do that, think of it in terms of like relative to all the other ones. So is that going to continue to be more of a problem than tornadoes or wildfires or flood or whatever the case may be? So like again, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah, I think it's been a more common occurrence.
Okay.
That's been the issue. The tornadoes have picked up everything else. I know, like last week we had a problem because of external feeds. I think we've had problems in the past because of external feeds. I think when we had that tornado, we had the same problem. Both times we lost a feed coming in. We'll run it by utilities and ask them. You know, they're more the experts than we are. I know what kind of messages I got, and it just makes me think. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. And Jade, when you go talk about these strategies briefly and then switch over to the actions, I'm just gonna step out for about 5 minutes, but I'll be right back. All right.
okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay. This is down here. These are the mitigation goals from the last plan. I believe there's 9. Yes, 9 goals. They'll have objectives underneath. These are went through in detail during the kickoff. But what we've been telling the other jurisdictions during their local planning meetings is that these, we thought the best course of action would be for Dewberry to go ahead and take a look and consolidate some of the objectives, just do a little wordsmithing in general, just clean them up to be a little bit more clear, and then we can recirculate them to you guys for approval or any other changes that you would like to see. As I stand right now, some of them are very similar, especially some of the specific objectives are very similar, and it gets to be a little bit repetitive. And basically the use for these is they're tied to specific mitigation strategies. So the more wordy and unclear they are, I guess like the harder it would be to tie them in correctly with the strategies. But if it sounds good to you guys, then we can just make some general updates, do some cleaning up, and recirculate these back out for comment. Does that sound good? Or I don't know if you guys have any specific thoughts on these that you wanted to share now.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let me just quickly save this. I will switch over to the Excel. Share that. Okay. So this is the mitigation strategies update sheet. You guys have probably seen before. We just wanted to collect the most up-to-date comments and status for each one of these strategies. The ones in blue, as you probably know, are ones that all the jurisdictions together are tackling, and then we have some at the bottom specific to you guys, and it looks like these three are suggested, so it's an addendum, so suggested add-ons since the 2016 plan. So we'll just go ahead and start at the top and see if we can get some updates. And also feel free to say, you know, if you don't want to pursue this strategy anymore, we can definitely take that out of this next version of the plan, or if you have completed some of them, then we can change those over to a capability. That's something that would be more ongoing. Okay, so the first one, strategy 2.1.1, investigate providing technical assistance for property owners to implement mitigation measures, such as strengthening building frame connections, elevating appliances, constructing a wind shelter. Do you guys have any updates on this one?
Still in progress, as far as I know.
Okay, are you guys do you have like some specific things planned, or how are you guys tackling this one?
They were elevating some of the things at critical facilities. The wind shelter, I don't know anything about. The city was going back and trying to strengthen some of the buildings before. So that's why I think it's still in progress. I don't necessarily think it's been completed yet.
Okay. In progress. Okay. And another thing to note, FEMA recently has been looking for plans to have more of a focus on metrics. So basically just something that we can measure each one of these by. So that's also something that we'll try and put into the next plan. I'll do this really quick. Okay, next one, strategy 5.1.4. The next update of hazard mitigation of the hazard mitigation plan include more detailed vulnerability assessments for man-made hazards based on FEMA and VDEM guidance. Said manpower, lack of funding. Just a quick note, the FEMA doesn't require looking at any man-made hazards. So sometimes, you know, if you run into limited resources, it can be a little bit more beneficial to focus on some of the natural hazards. But of course, if you do find that some of the man-made hazards, like you had mentioned, some of the power lines before are an issue, then, you know, we'll definitely put more time into that. It's just about weighing where you want to put the resources versus the requirements that FEMA has. So we definitely are still going to be looking at man-made hazards and, you know, beefing up those sections a little bit. So we can. Okay, strategy 5.2.1, identify training opportunities for staff to enhance their ability to use GIS for emergency management needs. And comment, city IT department maintains and provides GIS layers and training. You guys said you did get a GIS coordinator recently. Were you able to do any other training or anything else to help with your GIS capabilities?
We've had a coordinator for a while. I don't know of any training that's been done.
Okay. Is this something that you guys still would like to do for the next plan?
Doug?
Training, probably, particularly with depending on how our roles may integrate with between utility engineering and emergency management, and then whatever we're asked to do.
Okay. Noted.
I feel like all of our GIS capabilities were concentrated kind of in the IT and engineering departments.
Mm-hmm. So,
you know, there are some other applications that need to get kind of spread out in the other, you know, So that if we have to go out and do damage assessments with new staff, we're not learning on the fly. They have some idea of what they'll need to be doing, that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right, that is useful. Okay, strategy 5.2.2, provide training opportunities to local zoning and building code enforcement staff, educate them regarding damage assessment, mitigation techniques, and other related topics. And you said this is ongoing. Is that still true? Still ongoing? I know you said you wanted to ramp up with the damage assessment, but.
Are you looking for us to say yes?
Yeah, sorry, just confirmation.
Yeah, all
that
the
it's
above.
Still ongoing, okay. Okay. Strategy 5.3.3, coordinate with the state to update and digitize community flood insurance rate maps. So that's in the discovery process. Strategy 6.2.1, distribute information packets to raise awareness regarding the risks present in the West Piedmont region and provide disaster preparedness information. So this is one where the use of social media could be helpful. I know there's a couple of these strategies that all the jurisdictions are focusing on where they want to, distribute some type of information. And I don't know, do you guys have current social media profiles for the city, or do you use your website to disseminate information?
We have both. We have a cable access TV channel, we have a Facebook page, and we do stuff through the website.
All right, so that would be a good opportunity for this next plan. We could incorporate using some of these specifically and calling them out as ways to distribute some of this information, so you wouldn't have to go through, the trouble of having actual physical packets of information, if that's something that you think would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there like a annual Be Prepared month still? How can we use technology to promote those concepts of being readiness?
Yeah, that kind of ties in this one down here, 6.4.1. They talk about, the different awareness weeks and days and things like that. So those could be two that could work together. It says you were working with local media outlets on those ones. Yeah, so that could be a good opportunity to combine those. Okay, 6.2.3 says work with local home improvement stores to provide workshops to residents on mitigation techniques. Were you able to hold any workshops or anything for this one?
Probably the above. I mean, just continuing it.
Okay. So that is something.
But is there anything about working with new homeowners?
Let's see. I don't think we have anything that specifically.
As we're promoting home ownership and home investment, we should be working with homeowners, and as we are regulating and contacting rental properties, property owners, there's an opportunity to remind them also.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can definitely add that in. Specifically reach out to the property and homeowners.
Yeah, and also too, so there'll be a whole second session, and I'm not discouraging you. Let's capture some now if they come to mind, but we're going to have a session to talk about new strategies moving forward. And I've been, as we went through the other Word document, I made some notes about things that sounded like potential new projects. So just wanted to let you know that this is not the last opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to overwhelm people, but at the same time, we want to make the most of our contact points with them.
Right.
Okay. Next one down here, it says work with the Roanoke office of the National Weather Service to promote the Turnaround, Don't Drown public education campaign. What is the status of this one looking like?
Don't know anything about that.
Are you guys storm ready designated?
I believe we are. The Turnaround Don't Drown, I think they run stuff on the cable channel about that. But the problem is it doesn't seem too effective because we did have a death. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
I'm not sure how, yeah, we have that stuff. We get the information out. Whenever we have bad events, our multimedia person goes out live and does Facebook Live from around the city showing damage areas and other things. Hey, stay away from this. I'm not necessarily sure that's not making people want to go out and look at it themselves. But we get the information out telling folks.
Okay, yeah, that can definitely be tricky. So we can always modify this one, but it sounds like if you are actively, promoting some of these, and that might be able to move to a capability, but we can definitely look at other ways to reach the ultimate goal of that one, some new strategies. Okay, so these next few are specific just to Danville. We have strategy 1.2.14, review localities' compliance with the National Flood Insurance Programs, compliance with the NFIP. Let's see, NFIP with an annual review of the floodplain ordinances and any newly permitted activities in the 100-year floodplain. It says you have started a review of the flood plan in 2020. Do you have an update on that to complete the review?
Hey, Kenny, I think I got to run across the hall real quick to help someone. I'll be right back.
All right. We've got the thing where they're going through the floodplain maps. That was
Yeah, that was my guess. That's probably referring to the FEMA recovery and not to the annual review of the ordinances and permit activities.
okay.
But I think it's a good opportunity to add or tailor the strategy to say that when the maps are updated, that's a good time to take a comprehensive look at the ordinance and make sure it's up to speed and current.
Yeah, we did, like I said, we did that study. We're getting that one micro study down on Apple Branch. We're doing kind of some pocket stuff with the park along the river and doing that H&H. We've done some little mini things, but we're waiting to see the whole floodplain, what we've got to address.
Okay.
Okay. Next one says to evaluate the need for replacement of culverts that run beneath buildings in the downtown area. Culverts are antiquated, are in danger of collapse, which could lead to both the collapse of the buildings above them and increased flood risk. You said this is an ongoing issue and funding is holding you back here. So I assume this is still something that you want to pursue.
It is something we want to pursue, and we have done a little bit of it. They just redid a street, South Union, that we had problems with on one of the buildings and actually took a building down, created a pocket park. And as part of that, we were able to work on the storm drainage system underneath it. So we've taken some funding and done a little bit here and there. I'm trying to think where else we've done some work on downtown stuff. I think that's the only one off the top of my head. So we did do a little bit. It's still one of those things that as it comes about, we're doing more. And we get funding available, we'll do more. Union Street was the big one. We did some work on that.
Okay, strategy 4.3.2, work with VDOT, private utilities, and or private homeowners to trim or remove trees that could down power lines and block roads. You say this is an issue that you continue to work with parties to make sure that utilities are protected from falling trees. So this sounds like an ongoing project you guys are working on.
It is an ongoing project, and actually they were in my neighborhood cutting down stuff today. So,
all right, well, it sounds like it's pretty up to date then, so that's good. So
that is an actual in progress thing, and it will continue to be an in progress.
All right, good to hear.
Drones now, I think they're starting to fly some stuff with, I believe.
Wow.
I thought it was, somebody's using a drone to check power lines. I don't know if it's us. I thought it was us. It was easier to use them than send crews out. So
Yeah.
Makes sense.
We'd have to check with utilities and see if it's us doing that. We do use the drone on like the flooding and everything else. When we close roads off, we'll send drones out to look and see how high the water is in certain areas instead of trying to send people down who could have issues. So our multimedia person is using the drone quite a lot. And we used one actually on a collapsed building not too long ago. We had a part of our roof and a parapet fall into a street. So instead of sending an employee up in a bucket truck or anything to look at it, we took the drone up and used it to survey the damage to the building to see what kind of, how long we could have to close the street off for, if the building itself was potentially going to collapse or if it was just a portion that fell off. So I don't know if that technology counts towards anything, but it saved us from closing the street down for a long period of time. I know this isn't trees and stuff, but the drone made me think about that.
Yeah, no, that's good detail. Sounds like that is a little capability that you guys have, but well, that sounds like it's more efficient and safer. So good all around. Let's see. Okay, so these last three says 2019 editions. So it says evaluate roadways and stormwater management systems to determine risk from natural hazards and implement mitigation planning and actions. The city received a grant as part of the mitigation plan in 2020. The work will start in 2021. Is that still planned to start this year?
Yes, it is still planned to start this year.
Is the work like a study or something, or
yeah, they did the study on Apple Branch and its impact on Route 58. They were going to continue on and try and do a little more study of that and then see what kind of modifications are necessary to the roadway to keep it from flooding out, because we had to shut down one of the main roads through Danville during storm events. Trying to think of where else. That's what we're talking about. We applied for the grant to buy that building that we figure is a choke point on it. But yeah, that is in progress.
Was that a FEMA grant?
I want to say VDEM. Public Works applied for it, so I'm not sure who they applied with. The generators they're working on, yeah. That's a Tim Duffer thing. I don't know what the outcome of that was.
No problem. Add that to the list to send to Tim.
In the software program, again, we're using Crisis Track now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that covers that. And so instead of not started, I guess it'd be in progress. We had it, and they're updating all of the field. So we just last year, tail end of last year, got the new field tablets. They were installing Crisis Track either earlier this week or late last week on all the tablets, because when we got the tablets and they took them out, they found out that it didn't have it. So they were updating all those. So that is definitely in progress.
Okay. To hear, it sounds like if it's an ongoing thing, that might be a capability then. So that's good. We can add that in. All right.
You need to know the type of tablets or anything? We had iPads, switched out from iPads to some sort of, I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I don't think we have go into that much detail, do we, Scott?
No, I think you said you wanted to get it and be able to use it, and you've accomplished that. So it almost sounds like it completed to me, and now we can move it to a capability and say that now that you got it, you use it.
Yeah. All right. We have made it. Looks like everything is all updated. So like I said before, I will clean up these notes, compile everything, and then recirculate it to you guys as soon as I can.
Yeah, and I'll just take the opportunity to both thank you for your time this afternoon, especially on a Friday afternoon, but also to ask you to please try and be as responsive as you can to any of the follow-up items, just because we are on a tight time frame. We're already slightly behind and we're trying to catch up. So, but we'll get you some notes. We'll reach out to you, and appreciate the time.
Sure, no problem. I apologize. As you know, Doug had to leave to go do a zoning clearance. We have very minimal staff. I was able to hire him. So now it's just him and I. So we're
Understood.
get you as quick as we can. We apologize if we're a little late. So.
No worries. We understand. Any other questions for us or last minute comments before we adjourn?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
All right. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks for dealing with the technical difficulties up front, and we'll be in touch. Have a good weekend.
You too, guys. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.